Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a technique-based video for you today for the Lawnscaping Watercolor Challenge. So I'm going to be using two different ways of watercoloring today. So I'm starting with a piece of watercolor paper. I use the Canson 140 pound watercolor paper. It's cold press. And I have some distress inks and faded jeans, broken china, and peacock feathers. I have a stamping block, a clear block, and I will be adding the color right to this clear block to create a block of color right in the middle of my watercolor paper. So after spreading the three different inks on, and from like darkest to lightest, I give a little spritz of water. And in fact, I find that actually I spritz a little too much water the first time. But anyway, after spritzing the water, I squish it on in the center of the paper to create a block of color. And that's why I'm kind of thinking of it as watercolor color blocking, because you're creating a block of color. When you're adding the ink to the block, I do suggest making sure you overlap the colors just so you can get that blending, because I think that looks good. So when I pull it off, you'll see that it creates this puddle of water, which is why I say I probably put a little too much water, and later on you'll see I use less and it works out a little bit better. But to get rid of that puddle, I'm just using a towel and blotting it up and even spreading the color from the towel around, because I'm going to do it again. And so I'm just trying to create interests and variations in the little area. So again, starting with the dark faded jeans, I put the peacock feathers on the bottom and then the broken china in the middle. It's a little bit tricky to get the broken china on there because it's such a light color, but it works out. And so this time I spritzed with a little bit less water, and so that's what's creating those beads. And in the end, I think that actually gives really interesting texture, and I'm much happier with it. And so at this point, I'm going to stop fussing with it and just dry it, because if you like the way watercolor looks, the best thing you can do is stop and dry it. And then that way it kind of locks in that color for you. Now you could go back and smooth it out with enough water, but if you like where you are, stop and dry. Another way that you can add some variation, and I still thought I would want a little bit more interest, is to dip your, or sort of pull out the top of the water spritzer and just kind of flick little droplets of water on. You could also flick water droplets on with like a paintbrush or any other tool, but I have the water spritzer, so I just pull out the top and flick it on. And then the areas where there's little splots of water will kind of take color away and add interest. And so I wanted to use this Make Lemonade stamp from Fawn, because even though I've had it for a while, I picked it up when they were having all of their little sets on sale. I haven't really used it, and so I decided with this card today that I was definitely going to use it, and that's why I chose the blue colors, because the blue would present a nice contrast to yellow. So I'm going to stamp the little lemon from the set, so I need some yellow paper for it, and also I'm going to use yellow paper for my sentiment. So I just took these cheap watercolors that a friend gave me, and when she was simply getting rid of her stuff, and I just spritzed water onto the color that I wanted, used a wide Tim Holtz water brush, and spread the yellow color on. I was at first having a little bit of trouble getting the color on the way I liked it, so I actually just even spritzed the paper with a little bit of water, and then I was able to paint more easily. So if you're ever having trouble, your color's not spreading, you can spritz the paper with water as well. I'm using Archival jet black ink from Ranger to stamp the lemons, because it's a waterproof ink and also gives a really crisp image, so it's great when you're working with watercolor. I'm also using Milo's ABCs here to make a custom sentiment. Because I was using the lemons, I didn't want to say something like "you're so sweet," and I love pun cards, so I thought of my own custom pun, and I used this Milo's ABCs to spell it out there. I also used a grid block with lines, so a block with grid lines, and that helped me to line up my letters just very easily. And also Fawns have blocks on their letters, which helps you line up the letters as well. So here you see I was just fussy cutting the lemons. I'm going to use 3 lemons on the card, but I stamped some extras so I had them, and also cutting a banner by cutting in the middle and then from the sides. So I know I want to mount my panel on some blue cardstock, but first I've got to assemble all of my pieces onto the card. And I have 2 blocks of yellow, a little group of lemons, and then the sentiment. And so I want them to be opposite of each other on the card so the color balances itself out, but it still really pops because yellow is opposite blue on the color wheel, so using them together is a high contrast situation. So I'm just adding a little arrangement of lemons. The lemons that I want to be everything, all the other ones to be layered on top of, I adhere down first and then just kind of place them on. I put a little sticky back tape on each of them. And so once I have this adhered down, I noticed there's actually like a little bit of a smudge on the corner there, and I don't like that. So I'm going in with my adhesive eraser to see if I could just pull it out simply with the eraser. It says adhesive eraser, but I find that it actually will pull up a little bit of distressing too, but it didn't quite work. So then I decided to go in with an X-Acto knife, and that's something you might have seen Jennifer McGuire do. You probably watch her videos too. And she just kind of scrapes it away and then buffs it out with an eraser. So I gave that a shot and it worked pretty well. You can notice it, but it's not too noticeable, and I think it looks better than a splotch. I also wanted to mention that this watercolor blocking technique, I saw Laura Basson do something similar, and so that's kind of where I got the inspiration for it. And so now I'm adding a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot of foam adhesive because I want to pop this panel up a little bit, and also because when you work with watercolor paper it can warp a lot, and so to kind of get rid of that unevenness I'm mounting it with foam, and then you don't notice the unevenness as much in the end, whereas if you tape it right down you can kind of see the areas where it bubbles up a little bit. So I'm applying plenty of foam adhesive. I'm using the really thin Scotch foam adhesive because a lot of my cards go to Operation Right Home and they need really thin profile cards. So I'm just going to pop this panel up. I like that blue on the outside that's kind of pulling in the peacock feather colors and pulling the blue back in and giving a nice little around the border. So anyway, that's it for my card today. I hope you were able to give this technique a try. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel and visit my blog at blog.jesscrafts.com. I'm going to list some of the products in the description below, and thanks for stopping by.